If you want to trade like a Rebel, you got to come to RebelCon 2022. It's going to be in Dallas, Texas, at the fabulous Four Seasons Resort. It will be more fun and more live trading than we've ever done before. That's why it's called RebelCon 2022. We're going to have barbecues and double the amount of live trading. The guest speakers, as soon as we announce those, this thing's going to be sold out, limited to 250 people. Sign up now for RebelCon 2022 at the Four Seasons in Dallas, Texas.
Welcome to the Rebellion.
I'm Pete Najarian, and that is John Najarian. We're going to find out in just a second or two where in God's name this guy is. I mean, it's he's always somewhere. This is the Rebel's Edge. We are going to go through a whole bunch of stuff in a very, very rapid pace. It's going to be exciting. But before we do that, John, do you mind telling me where on earth you are?
No, I don't mind at all. I'm over in Croatia, Pete. I'm just outside of Dubrovnik right now. We're on this big, beautiful 120-foot yacht. And we've just been having fabulous meals. We walked around the, they have a big walled city where they filmed Game of Thrones, Pete. Mm-hmm. So I know you're not a huge Game of Thrones fan, but they get a huge crowd that shows up there. We did some cliff diving from off of there, and it was all great. But I know we got to focus on the Rebel's Edge, so I'll let you take it.
I got to tell you, I love that you're in Croatia. It's friggin' phenomenal. And if you guys saw the boat that he's on, you'd go, wait a minute. It's pretty awesome, guys. John, first, we're going to start off. We're looking at four different things, but the first one's going to be Tesla. It's right there. Tesla has been amazing. It's had an unbelievable July. It started off at $674. It's run all the way up well over $900. Matter of fact, today it hit $935 before pulling back a little bit. EV space has been ripping pretty good. I look over at Rivian. That's had a really nice run as well. John, what is the story with this one, though? Is it Elon Musk? Is he buying again, or what's going on?
Well, you and I know, Pete, that if he was buying, he would supposedly have to disclose that, because he is a significant holder. Anytime he buys or sells, he's supposed to disclose. So we both also know that Elon doesn't always play by the same rules as everybody else. And sometimes that gets him in trouble. But a lot of times it's a good thing. And the fact that it's up better than $200, Pete, since July 19th, that's a phenomenal run. And I think you said, hey, the EVs themselves, that's part of it because of the legislation that passed last week about, what's going on with supporting green energy and so forth through Congress. And I just think that this is a good thing that people are keeping an eye on Tesla. And I jokingly said, I hope Bill Gates chokes on those short shares, Pete. I don't really wish any ill on Bill Gates, but it's kind of funny that he pushes against the only guy who's really been successful in the EV space. Hey, Pete, what about Boeing, though? Because Boeing today had two bits of good news, and this is a company that doesn't get one bit of good news for the last 2 years, really. First one was the strike was averted, and the second one was the Dreamliner. What do you think?
Yeah, and the delivery, John, they were talking about the delivery of an unbelievable number of aircraft, talking about 120 different planes, and we're talking $300 million each. Pretty amazing, right? The issue that Boeing will still have, however, is debt. And when you look at their debt, John, it's just extraordinary, all for the right reasons, because they, of course, have had a lot of issues over the last 2 to 5 years or so. But it's interesting, and I think that Boeing could be one of those that really can take flight. And we've seen some option activity in there as well. Can this thing make a substantial move to the upside if they can continue on this pace? Absolutely. But Where do you stand on Boeing right now, John? I know we've both stayed away from it for a long period of time, but it might be time to start looking at this name again.
Yeah, I do think, Pete, that this is one of those companies that, after having as much bad news thrown at them as they could possibly get, I think now they are in that value mode, where it wouldn't be a bad idea for people to own some shares. But Pete, do you think it's a good idea to own any of the cruise lines now? Um, they just can't seem to get out of their own way. As good as things are for the airlines,
Yep.
the cruise ships just are not doing it, and they're
Yeah.
not making money on these cruises. And now Royal Caribbean's down 10% today.
Yeah, people are excited to get on these cruises and everything, John, and that part of it has been good, but that certainly has been a struggle. And when you look at debt and when you look at the fact that they keep having to put out these offerings to raise money, I think the 900 million that they just put out, that was just one more sign that these guys are in a very tough spot. They obviously, we all know the whole story going through the pandemic and everything else, but whether it's Royal or Carnival or Norwegian, they're all sitting somewhere very, very close still to 52-week lows. And when I say that, forget the 52-week lows. How about the lows if you go back to the pandemic itself, John? This is an area that just is struggling. They've got debt. They've got a lot of issues. Can they generate cash? It's definitely a problem. And for me, I don't think that I've found a reason yet that I want to start getting involved in these cruise ships. What about you?
Well, I've traded them, Pete. I've traded CCL, which is Carnival Cruise Lines, and I've traded Norwegian Cruise Lines, NCLH. I haven't traded this one we're talking about right now, Royal Caribbean, that's doing this $900 million convert. But if you're somebody who thinks that the people who cruise really love cruising, it might not be a bad idea. That convert gives you the right to convert from a bond, somebody who lends money to the company, into the shares of the company. And that's something that could be interesting here, given that, as Pete said, you're picking them up near the 52-week lows and even near the pandemic lows.
Yeah, no doubt. John, next one we got to hit is oil. Oil's been really interesting because we all know we've watched it over the last few months, for instance, but we've been as high as 100 and a quarter ish, somewhere in that range. We've pulled back. We've gotten underneath 100. Just the other day, we were back over 100, but it feels like we're in a little bit of a tight area right now. It feels like we're somewhere between, call it 94, maybe 99, maybe it's 100. But what do you think right now with crude, John? Because I'm still excited about what they're doing. I still think that the demand is there. The supply is not. And I think that the supply end of it's going to continue to be a real pain for folks. And I think that that's why maybe crude can hold up at these levels and maybe even make a jump higher again. But what do you think?
Well, I think, Pete, the 92 level should hold for crude. That's West Texas Intermediate or WTI. Brent a little bit higher than that, of course. But given what's still going on, just not too far from where I am, Pete. I mean, I'm in Croatia. It's not exactly right on the border of Ukraine or anything like that, but it's not that far. And obviously what's going on over there is horrible for the Ukrainian people. It's a tragedy, and it will keep a lot of Russian crude oil and natural gas off of the collective markets outside the BRICS. Brazil, India, China, South Africa, they're still going to be buying it like crazy, though. So I think this is something you got to keep your eye on. But I agree. I think I'm a buyer at crude, Pete, at that 92 level. And I think we're back over 110 by September.
And CapEx has been restrained. We heard from Chevron, John. They had an unbelievable number the other day, of course, and jumped significantly to the upside. 9% move out of a big, huge, massive company like Chevron. That says a lot, but they were on the lower end of what they talked about for CapEx. Like it's somewhere close to 15 billion, but that was the lower end. So it tells you that they're still out there pretty cautious about the future as far as, they don't want to overdo it either. And so they're obviously doing the right thing. All right, John, you've got some unusual. What do you got in TIP?
Okay, TIP. This is these Treasury inflation protected. That's what a TIP is. And they're buying puts. So if you're somebody that doesn't trade options, again, you perhaps should consider it, but we're not going to twist your arm. We are going to tell you that when people buy puts, they are betting on the downside of that market. In this case, that particular ETF, exchange traded fund, that tracks that treasury inflation protection, those kinds of bonds. So if they were buying calls, that would be bullish. They're not. They're buying puts, which means that they think it's going lower. They basically bought at the money, meaning that they bought something that's going to move about half as much to the downside as the actual ETF itself, the TIP. And I think, Pete, we're not that far off the 52-week lows for this one. And I think it keeps going lower. I think these treasury that are tied to inflation are going to keep going lower. So I would, if you're not in them, you can stay away. But if you are, you might want to keep an eye on that chart because it looks like it's going lower. How about you? Do you have an unusual activity?
I do. John's talking about puts and the downside for the TIP. I'm looking at NVIDIA right now, John, NVDA. This has been an unbelievable run. You go back to July 1st and you look at that stock, it was trading about 145 bucks. Here we are today trading about $185, and we've got a buyer of upside calls. They're buying Friday. So this is very, very, very short term. We've seen this in NVIDIA a lot. 20,000 of Friday's expiring calls at the 190 strike, a price around $1.50. It did get higher than that as the stock started to move, and then it's pulled back a little bit. So looking at around $1.50 for those calls, the 190s should be pretty interesting. Definitely going to keep an eye on this one. It's been strong. The semiconductors in most cases have had a pretty nice rebound after getting hammered pretty hard. But NVIDIA, unbelievable name. I like what we were seeing here. I'm in these calls. I'm excited about what could be coming this week. But the great thing is I have a defined risk. I know exactly whatever I paid, that's the most I can lose. So that's the beauty of options at times. And that's something that I think is really important as well. John, we got a lot of sports to cover. We got a short period of time. What do you think right now when we get in the sports world?
Before we get there, before we get to sports, Pete, we got to tell people that didn't understand what you and I were talking about with options, or people that just want a little more definition on how technicals work in the market, meaning charts and so forth. Well, we've got RebelCon coming up. RebelCon 2022. This is our big conference, folks. Goes on September 21st through the 24th. It's going to be down in Dallas, Texas. I was just told, Pete, because I'm on this cruise with a couple that's very active in the hotel space. And they said, John, it was a Four Seasons. Now it's a Ritz. So they just went from Four Seasons to Ritz badging on that particular hotel. But if you go to RebelCon, you will get a great education. You'll meet a lot of nice people. You'll be able to get out there and have some good camaraderie on the golf course if you choose to do that. If you bring your significant other, they're going to be sitting there in the Ritz at the spa. They'll thank you for it, and you'll thank us for getting a great education. Pete will be speaking. I'll be speaking. AJ Monty, our big technical analyst, will be speaking. Brian McCormick, also very good in charts. Ryan Mastro. We have so many, Mike Yamamoto, so many of our great educators will be there, and a lot of special guest speakers like Brian Sullivan and others. So go to marketrebellion.com/Dallas. That's marketrebellion.com/Dallas. You can learn all about it. If you scan that QR code there, you'll be able to be brought right to the spot. And like Pete said, it's going to be fun. And there's going to be a lot of great education. But what about sports now, Pete? What did we need to cover next about Deebo?
Deebo Samuel, this guy's unbelievable. Everybody's wondering all throughout the offseason, John, what was going to happen with this guy, because he was absolutely unbelievable. He was in his own world in terms of he was a great running back for the 49ers. He's a great wide receiver, great kick returner. The guy, just about everything you threw at him, he was able to accomplish and be comparable to the very best. Well, now he's in that category. There are now 7 receivers, John, who are getting $24 million a year. That's right, $24 million a year or more. And in Debo's situation, 73, 74 million. I mean, once you get up to those numbers, who cares? But this was an extension that he signed. Kid comes out of South Carolina. He's a great young man. He's the hardest working guy you could ever see in the world. When you watch the 49ers, it's hard not to see him just showing everybody what he can do. He led the NFL in multiple different categories in terms of receiving. He just did just about everything you could ever want, John. That's a guy you want on your team because he's out there making sure he's done everything possible to make sure that the team has a shot to win. Have you ever had an opportunity to meet this guy or talk with this guy? He's unreal, John, and he's a special, special guy.
Yep, I agree, Pete. And you already nailed it. I mean, some teams will sign a guy just for punt and kick returns.
Yeah.
And this guy is deadly on punt and kick returns. Yeah. But he can also take that pitch, or he can take a shot, from the quarterback going down the middle. I think there's just huge potential. It's only his third, he's coming into, I think, his fourth year in the league, Pete.
Yep.
So a lot of upside there. How about Josh Allen? I mean, I know this is one of your favorite players, Pete.
Yeah.
And he is because he's got talent and attitude. But it's not a bad attitude, except the bad attitude on Sunday against the other team.
Well, the thing I love about the guy, John, just his background. So he's 6'4". He weighs about 250 pounds, regardless of what it says in the program. He's bigger than what they list him at. He's a big individual. I've stood next to him. He's a great young man, got a monster contract almost immediately because I think Buffalo realized we really found something in this guy. And all he's done is had year after year after year now of pushing this team right on the verge of maybe getting into the Super Bowl. So everything about him I like, but what I really like, John, to show you what kind of swagger he is, the other day in practice, he's up there in Buffalo. Everybody's just kind of walking around. They got helmets and no shoulder pads, helmets and jerseys and everything. So they had a little play, and he comes running in, and they're down by the end zone, and he decides to run it in for a touchdown. Well, while he does that, one of the defensive linemen kind of gave him a little bit of a shove in the back of the shoulders. He turns around, goes face to face, and starts fighting with the guy. I mean, the passion that he has for the game and the fact that everybody knows you never touch a quarterback, especially a quarterback who's getting paid $260+ million in his contract. You probably don't want to touch that guy after he gets past you going into the end zone in practice. But it just shows you the passion that the guy has. And I'll tell you, John, of the quarterbacks, and you and I have talked a little bit about this, but this guy has got to be somewhere in the conversation right now in the NFL because he runs like a running back. He's as big as a tight end, and he can throw the ball the length of the field. But what do you think about Buffalo this year or Josh Allen?
I like the chances. I like them a lot. And obviously, San Francisco was a great team, but they just were this far from doing it, Pete. I know that's a different league, NFC versus AFC, but I think Buffalo, from the fact that KC lost, Tariq the streak, and so forth, I think it's hard to replace a guy that's that big a threat. So long story short, I think Buffalo's team to beat in the AFC this year. But you know what, folks? You've been seeing our handles on here. Pete is at Pete Najarian. I'm at John Najarian. Tell us what you think. Shoot us some love on Twitter. Retweet the Rebels Edge and tell us what you think. I mean, is Buffalo the team to beat? Is Deebo Samuels, the number one receiver in football? There you go. That's our handles at Pete Najarian, John Najarian, and our TikTok. Don't forget that, Official Market Rebellion. Well, till tomorrow, folks. Remember, we're on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So pass it along. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m.